Azerbaijan is about to host COP29, the UN's climate change conference, while actively expanding its fossil fuel empire and jailing those who expose its corruption. And here's how Azerbaijan is trying to hide the truth. Through a massive but messy propaganda campaign, Azerbaijan has unleashed an army of bots, influencers, and coordinated media coverage to try to paint itself as a peaceful environmental champion. The problem is, oil and gas account for 92% of Azerbaijan's exports and roughly half its GDP. Nas Daily, an influencer account with millions of followers, has made a couple propaganda videos from Azerbaijan, most recently celebrating Azerbaijan as the first oil country going green.
This is a big deal!
They opened one solar park. Calm down. Here's the truth. In 2023, Azerbaijan's state oil company SOCAR allocated 97% of its capital investments to oil and gas projects. And SOCAR's green energy division only appeared after Azerbaijan secured COP29 hosting rights. Azerbaijan also plans to increase gas production by 32% over the next 10 years. Azerbaijan is a petro-dictatorship, and that alone makes it a pretty bad choice to host a climate conference. And then, there's Azerbaijan's abysmal human rights record. Azerbaijan ranks 164th out of 180 countries in Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index, making it one of the most repressive countries for journalists on Earth. Azerbaijan currently holds more than 300 political prisoners and has arrested more than a dozen reporters since being named host of COP29. In August, Azerbaijan arrested researcher and journalist Baruz Samadov. He's been charged with high treason just for his critical reporting work and for communicating with Armenians. And then there's Dr. Gubad Ibadoglu, a prominent economist and critic of Azerbaijan's oil and gas industry. Last July, while driving through Baku with his wife, 4 unmarked cars suddenly surrounded Ibadoglu's, ramming it from both front and back. Officers dragged the couple from their car and beat them before forcing them into separate vehicles. Ibadoglu was then imprisoned on fabricated charges of counterfeiting money and extremism. He remains under house arrest in Baku. We interviewed Ibadoglu's daughter, Zhala Bayramova. What did you feel when you heard that Azerbaijan was going to be the host of COP29?
So imagine that your family members are physically detained in this way, and then Azerbaijan is basically rewarded by organizing COP29. It's extremely disappointing and frustrating, because Azerbaijan wants to have the COP29 so they can actually have more oil and gas contracts and also greenwash their image. I think it's a quite of a well-known fact, and my dad's research also shows how Azerbaijan has been selling Russian oil and gas and also pumping it to Europe.
One of Ibadoglu's focus areas has been the surreptitious reselling of Russian oil to Europe. After the war in Ukraine started, the EU rushed to sign new gas deals with Azerbaijan for the stated purpose of reducing reliance on Russian energy. But this led to Azerbaijan more than doubling its imports of Russian gas. In the first 3 months of 2024 alone, Azerbaijan's Star refinery processed over $1.2 billion worth of Russian oil, with over 90% of its products going to Europe. Azerbaijan's oil industry has its fingerprints all over COP29. Mukhtar Babiev, the president of COP29, was an executive at SOCAR for 26 years. The Secretary General of OPEC said he was glad that Azerbaijan was hosting COP29 so that he could be sure that the gas industry's views would be heard. And what could be more important than that at a climate change conference? But this isn't just about Azerbaijan's oil industry. Azerbaijan has a track record of cynically exploiting environmental causes for political ends. In December 2022, the government orchestrated a fake eco-protest to block the one road connecting Armenia to Nagorno-Karabakh and cut off the 120,000 Armenians there from food, medicine, and essential services. Azerbaijani government volunteer groups were bussed in to hold mass-produced signs bearing meaningful slogans like "Save Nature" and "Stop Pollution." Adila Aliyeva, who holds a leadership role at one of the Azerbaijani government volunteer organizations, received a presidential award during the blockade. Now, she's been named head of volunteers for COP29. And a lot of the so-called eco-activists who took part in the blockade under her direction are now also working at COP29. So if you go to COP29, there's a good chance that the person who gives you your badge had a hand in starving Armenians. The blockade didn't only create a humanitarian crisis. It was a prelude to Azerbaijan launching new military attacks on Nagorno-Karabakh and ultimately displacing virtually all the Armenians there. Let's talk about how absurd it is for a country that ethnically cleansed an entire region just over a year ago to now host a UN conference that's supposed to be about, in large part, human rights. This is how Azerbaijan operates. Military force backed by an extensive influence buying operation. There are still indictments coming out of the Azerbaijani laundromat, a $2.9 billion scheme that used UK shell corporations to bribe European politicians to whitewash Azerbaijan's reputation and silence criticism of its human rights violations. More than 2,500 oil industry lobbyists are expected to attend COP29, where they'll meet with officials from all over the world, a dangerous prospect given Azerbaijan's history of bribery. And since the CEO of COP29 was already recorded agreeing to facilitate oil deals,
there are a lot of joint ventures that could be established, potential joint ventures.
it looks like the corrupt fun is already starting. So to review, holding the UN Climate Conference in a violent petro-dictatorship is absurd. But on the bright side, it looks like this COP is going to be less successful than previous years, with world leaders like Biden, Macron, and even Aliyev's buddy Ursula von der Leyen skipping altogether.